Welcome back to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. This is episode 24 with Eric Wohlwend of Clear Sky Realty out of Ohio. We touch on so much good stuff in this podcast. This absolutely is one you can't miss. We're talking about private lending, seller financing, mobile home parks, storage units, building your portfolio. This guy's he's got several hundred units right now. I think he says over 300 units. He's diversified in different aspects of real estate investing. Another episode you can't miss. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate. Joe Mueller.
All right, welcome back to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Today we've got a guest named Eric Wohlwend out of Ohio. Eric, how you doing today?
Very good. How are you, Joe?
Great. Thank you for asking, and thank you so much for coming on the show and taking the time out today to inspire our audience and our listeners about your story. And with that said, why don't we get started?
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit more about how you got started in real estate and what you're up to nowadays.
Well, back in 2003, I lost my job, and at that point in time, I had exactly one rental property, a single-family home, and I decided, hey, I've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I've read all these other books, I've listened to all these different, actually not podcasts, they were cassette tapes at the time, a couple of CDs, so let's see if we can make it go with this real estate thing. Mm-hmm. So I bought another single-family home, bought a couple of duplexes, bought a 4-unit. Next thing you know, I've got a 6-unit in another city. I've got a couple of storefronts. I'm 30 years old, have about 20 properties, and decided I should retire. And I got to tell you, you should not retire when you're 30 years old. You have way too much time.
Okay.
So then I came back and pretty much immediately started 2 companies, started doing some public speaking and traveling all over. And we dabbled with a real estate brokerage, which my wife pretty much runs now.
Okay.
After speaking for about a year all over the U.S. and Canada, I gave that up because I realized I had spent 6 months on the road out of the first year of my son's life.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So now I stay at home much more, and we've grown. I buy whatever's on sale. Currently, I'm buying a 60-unit apartment complex.
Okay.
I have a lot of other smaller apartments, but they have been so hard to find lately. So about a year ago, I got into the storage facility business and have one of those. And right after the crash, I let everything settle down and went in and bought a mobile home park in 2010. And then bought a couple more after that because it was making so much money. So now okay. I've got a few mobile home parks, and I've got a storage facility, a bunch of houses, apartments. But I look for whatever's on sale, I buy it. We really focus on repositioning. I like to come in, get them cheap, and fix the management and or maintenance problems that a lot of these people are having.
Okay.
I think this year I've already bought out 3 different real estate investors because there's a lot of them that are just retiring.
Really?
You know, in the Midwest, in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, there was a lot of building going on. Mm-hmm. Well, the people that are doing that are now 70, 80, 90, and they just went out. So we've worked out great deals. I very rarely use banks. I deal strictly with either private money or with the investors themselves that are selling. And if you show them a good track record, it's a lot easier. They're used to collecting rents. Why not collect a payment from me? I have a near perfect credit score. I have 20 or 30 references that I can give you at any time. So it makes buying a whole lot easier. And I think that's one thing I do differently than a lot of other people. They try and pay cash for everything or go out and get a bank loan. It just takes too long. I walk in, sit down, say, hey, I'd love to help you out. How about I buy everything you have? And let's work out a good deal.
Oh, I love that concept. I mean, that's a great idea as far as acquiring properties, especially in, I would assume, in bulk, bulk capacity type style, right? Because you're buying out entire portfolios.
Right, but some of the bulk capacity is only a couple of houses. I set up a deal where the guy, he had already sold out. I said, yeah, I'll buy you out. Well, I found out he had already sold all but one of his single-family homes.
Right.
Another one, the one that's selling the 60 unit, she had 35 houses. Now she's down to 3 houses and 1 60 unit from 35 houses and 3 large complexes. Okay. I said, well, let's start with the 60, and, you know, if it makes your life easier and you can't get rid of the other 3 houses, I'll take them too.
Okay.
But you know, it might be one property that's left, and there's others that guy had. I think I bought 12 units. He has 9 left, and we're still working. They're just so over leveraged. I can't even figure out a good deal for him.
Sure.
And I'm not willing to take his mistakes and pay for them. So I think I spent an hour and a half on the phone with some of his private lenders yesterday. And that'll be another call today, is to talk to the person that has a second mortgage on his 6 unit and see if we can't work out a deal where they still get their money. I get a good enough deal that I'm willing to buy it, and he can get out from under it.
Sure. So definitely utilizing the creative finance methods in order to build your own business and portfolio, which I want to hear more about. I want to hear about this 60 unit that you're in the process of acquiring. But before we get too far into it, I'd like to take a step back, because the first minute or so you belted out a bunch of stuff you did, like within the first, you're like, okay, I started with a single family house. I mean, can we talk a little bit more about how you got started in the beginning and the first couple transactions? I love the fact that you retired at 30. I mean, tell us more about what you went through to get there, and, what ended up happening that brought you right back into this business. And I know you were in the armed service, or in the armed forces at one point, correct? You're a veteran.
I was.
Okay.
I'm airborne, sapper, have a bunch of qualifications, spent 4 years at Fort Bragg. Right after 9/11, I was reactivated in the reserve, and I spent 7 months guarding the dirt stateside. Okay. I really didn't have a job. I had an extra stripe or two, and I was watching a bunch of completely competent adults open and close a gate. My only job was if a terrorist attacked.
Sure.
So I had 6.5 hours a day, 7 days a week, that I could read books on investing. And
awesome.
That's what I did.
That is awesome. Well, thank you for your service, number one. Thank you for your service, number one.
Oh, you're welcome.
And number 2, I think that's great that you were able to utilize that time a little more efficiently for yourself, and, create a future as a result after you served your time for our country. So when you got out of the Army, what was the next step? What happened?
Well, the day that I left there, I didn't know I was leaving, but this was a short-term deployment. It lasted for 7 months. Like I said, I was stateside. I was still in uniform. I drove straight from the armory that I was working at to Huntington Bank to talk to a loan officer I dealt with buying my own house and my first rental house. Mm-hmm. And I went in and said, I'm basically done getting jobs. This was it. I was a high school teacher for a year before that. Before that, I worked in emergency medicine for many years. I said, I'm just done. My whole life, I actually have a degree in pre-med and zoology. I was going to go to med school. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks before I started, I decided not to do that, which led me to bounce from the emergency medical field to teaching anatomy and physiology, then to the Army again for 7 months.
Right.
So I was kind of looking for what I wanted to do. And that day, that shock, hey, this is it. Deployment's over. You're still in the Army, but now you're back to 1 weekend a month.
Okay.
I decided I need something to do, and I'm tired of getting jobs working for other people. So I went straight to the bank, got pre-approved for a loan, because, this was before 2007. Anybody can get a loan.
Right.
And I bought my second rental property for, I paid something in the 20s.
Okay.
But I do remember that I made $22,999.94. And I had that check hanging on my refrigerator for a long time.
Awesome.
It took me 6 weeks, and I got that check, which was roughly what I made for a year as a high school teacher.
Wow.
And I made it in 6 weeks, got to keep the property, and I was making about $50 a month with the property rented out.
Okay.
So I said, hey, maybe there's something to this real estate thing.
Sure.
And I decided, hey, I can buy a house. It takes me basically a month to close. I can fix it up in a month, and it'll be rented, and I can buy the next one. So every 2 to 3 months, I could do this. Well, then I started working with investors. I joined the local RIA group.
Okay.
And I was a member of the Alliance Property Owners Group, is what that one was called. And I started talking to some of my first important mentors. I'd had people that helped me here and there that I talked to, but I really met some great people there that really helped me out. And some of them were selling properties. So now I'm buying something, generally REOs, through a realtor, but I'm also buying some of their properties, and they're willing to give me some owner financing. I don't have to deal with banks.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's a great deal. And the one guy, Larry, financed a duplex for me for 2 years. I paid him off exactly 60 days later.
Wow.
And his words to me were, as much as you want for as long as you want.
Awesome.
And so I started buying more stuff from him, and he cut me off when I got up to a few $100,000. Mm-hmm. He says, yeah, I know I said as much as you want, but you're over $250,000. Yeah, I know, Larry. But since then, I've paid all of that off, and I've bought many more properties from him throughout the years.
Now, was Larry acting in a private lender capacity, or is he actually seller financing you, his own property selling to you?
He's seller financing his own properties.
Right, so he got to a point where $250 was enough for him.
Yeah, and then as long as you always pay people early, I had another person who said, I only ever loan up to $100,000 out to any one person.
Right.
And I talked to her yesterday, and I'm not sure how much she has currently loaned to me, but she financed my storage facility, so that's close to 100. And then she's financed at least 1 or 2 houses, so we're 150. I talked to her yesterday, and she said, oh, by the way, she says, I have at least $50,000 right now if you're interested in buying anything. Nice. And, I can have 65 or 70 by January. Wow. So, yeah, pay them early, and make sure you always take care. Like when bad things were happening in 2007, I sent out letters to every one of my private lenders and people that have financed anything. I said, I know you're probably hearing stuff on the news. Real estate is having a terrible time. I want you to know that your money is absolutely safe. I am having no problem. Rents are doing fine. If anything, they're going up. And, everything's wonderful.
Awesome.
But
That's
it's
a
the
great
little
idea.
things. Yeah, keep them informed of what's going on.
Absolutely, I agree.
So
let me interject real quick.
Track.
No. I love it. This is what it's all about. And you just provided some great information to anybody out there who's potentially going to work or is working with a private lender. And I remember taking that away, and that's what taking that away from our conversation where we initially met. And I wanted to touch on that real quick because we haven't really discussed where you mentioned the Midwest, but it's mainly Ohio. Is that where you got started then as well?
That's correct.
Okay.
I just happen to be lucky enough to live in a place where there are all kinds of cheap properties.
Yes,
that being
awesome.
said, everything across the Rust Belt, everything in the Midwest,
Sure.
It doesn't matter if you're in Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Illinois, there are just so many great deals. I'd mentioned my wife runs a management company. Mm-hmm. So you can be anywhere and invest here. We just had a guy from Oregon that he called us up, hired us when he had 50 units, and we took him all the way to over 400 units.
Wow.
And now he's managing stuff on his own. We have another person we actually signed from Oregon last night. We finally got the paperwork done, and he's starting out with 12 units right here in Canton, Ohio.
Okay.
And he wants to grow. So now he's set up to do that.
Awesome. No,
but
that's
you can do
incredible.
This anywhere here. There's so many cash flowing deals
I
that
agree.
you just have to be in contact with the right people so you can find them.
It's all about relationships.
It absolutely is. Mm-hmm. That's why I spend so much time at these conferences. It's fantastic to hear the speakers, but I think I do more deals and make more money after hours than I do the whole day at the conference.
So that's what I wanted to mention is we were at the Ohio Real Estate Investors Association annual conference, and we met at something they host there called the Advanced Deal Makers Forum. And that's like a one-day event, 8 hours, where you got investors that have to have a minimum number of units or transactions in order to kind of apply and, get into the room, we'll call it, like invite-only type stuff. And Eric and I, and actually Eddie McCracken, one of the previous guests on the podcast, I think he was podcast number 3 or 4, he was there as well, and we ended up hanging out after hours, and I got to know Eric a little bit better. And that's what it's all about, like you just said, because you mentioned so much inspiring and motivational stuff that what I took away from the conversation was this guy basically dropped what he was doing and started up from essentially nothing and grew a massive real estate business. So now you have a brokerage, you're managing properties for investors, you've built an awesome portfolio, you're in all types of aspects of real estate. So with that said, why don't we continue on with how you got through that initial growth phase, and then I want to hear more about the advanced stuff you're working on now.
Excellent. Going from 1 house to 2 is just a linear step. Anybody can do that. And from 2 to 3, and I had it planned out linearly. Well, now I'm growing exponentially, and it's very hard to see that. My wife and I were talking about this before. It's easy to see, okay, if I do this, I can buy 1 house every 3 months. That's 4 a year.
Right.
But how do you go from 4 a year when you're getting started to 2 years later owning 20? Mm-hmm. Now, I decided that it's not really that much more work to buy a 4-unit than it is to buy a single-family home. And sometimes the deals are in single-family homes. Sometimes the deals are in big units. To throw in the banker I was talking to a couple days ago, he said, "What's your plan? Are you going to, move into buying bigger properties?" I said, "No, I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm buying what's on sale. I want to get the best deal with the best cash flow." First of all, know the difference. Know what you're looking for. If you want cash flow, you buy one type of property. If you want capital gains, you buy another. And I buy houses for capital gains. I don't necessarily sell them, but it's far easier to buy a house under value. Go out, fix it up, and then have somebody put a loan on it. You take all your money out plus an extra $20,000 tax-free. Then you can use that as a down payment on a larger property that's going to give you a lot of cash flow.
Sure.
And as long as I break even, or it'd be nice to make about $50 a month per house. But as long as I break even, I can do a couple of houses and use that to buy, a small mobile home park or a small apartment building.
Sure.
And then if you need to, right now, I've never really sold any real estate. I own, over 300 units.
Okay.
Right around in there. And that's split up over all different types of real estate. And I think I've sold 10 or 11 units. One was my personal home I sold to a homeowner, and all the rest I sold to new investors that I was helping, mentoring, and helping them get started.
That's incredible.
But a couple of them were in my IRA, which for my own personal reasons, it's fantastic to do real estate in your IRA, but you also lose a lot of benefits like depreciation, tax benefits. So if I'm doing something in my IRA, I just as soon sell it to another investor and hold the note on it.
Okay.
I don't really sell. That being said, right now, I'm finding a couple of these bigger deals where I could use a few $100,000.
Okay.
So I've got a couple of 4 units and a 5 unit that I just for the first time put up for sale. I think I talked about it. I got the brilliant idea standing in front of 800 people at OREA that first night. But I was up there and they said, "Do you have anything you want to sell?" I said, "Yeah, I'd probably sell a couple of my smaller apartment buildings." But that's what you do. If you want to get started, buy the houses so you can get the capital gains. You can either flip them, as some people like to fix them up nice, retail them, and get the most amount of money. I'd just as soon refinance them, keep them rented, pay them off over a short time frame. I set up the mortgage, so I'm, making $50 a month or breaking even, somewhere in between there. I don't need to make much money on those as long as I can get a big chunk of change out.
Sure.
Then take that money and invest it into a nice mobile home park, which these are the things that are making me the most money right now.
Mobile home parks.
And I can buy mobile home parks anywhere from, $100,000 up to $1 million. You can spend far more or far less than that, but I bought one with 10 units for $87,000. I put about half the money down, and they financed the other half over 5 years. Well, I just paid that off early, so now it's cash flowing like crazy. Wow. I have another one that's a 50 unit that I paid $775,000 for, which was probably on the high side, but the financing made it worth it. I have a great deal. It's fully amortized, and it's bringing in, I don't know, $3,000 a month on average.
Right.
So that's a pretty good deal. That bought me a new sports car.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. So how many mobile home parks are you currently, how many mobile home parks do you own right now?
I own 3 right now.
Awesome. We just had a guest on, actually, our last episode, Jack Bazak. He's an investor out of the Illinois area, but he actually invests all over. So he's done stuff in like Texas and Oklahoma, and he's focused on mobile home parks. And we talked a little bit about, and I know we touched on this as well during the OREA conference, about some of the challenges that come into having a vacant lot on the actual mobile home park. Is that something we can get into a little bit?
Sure. Everybody wants to sell mobile home parks based on, hey, I've got a 65-unit mobile home park.
Right.
And I believe this one's for sale in Youngstown, Ohio. I took one look at it, and there's only 14 or 15 homes on the place. You don't have a 65-unit. I don't care what you pay to the state. In Ohio, it is one of the worst, most difficult states to move a mobile home. A lot of people, for instance, John, our instructor, he just flat out won't buy in Ohio. And he said, if I ever get any deals, I'll just send them to you. You write me a small check for a finder's fee.
Sure.
Fantastic. I'll do that. I'm willing to deal with the headache, heartache, and hassle. And because I do that, I get paid a lot more.
Sure.
There are a lot of other states that are far easier to do business in. Okay. And if you look at it, look at the best and the brightest, the people that make the most money in real estate. For instance, the president-elect. Or what's the lady's name on Shark Tank?
Oh, yeah.
The ones
Barbara?
that they made, right.
Yep.
She made all of her money in real estate, basically in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump has stuff everywhere, but that's where he's based. That has got to be the most miserable city in the world to own real estate in. With rent controls and everything. You get paid the most for doing what nobody else is willing to do.
Right, sure.
So here I am comparing a mobile home park to Trump Tower. But you go where it's hard, and you take the extra risk and the extra hassle, and as long as you pull it off, you get paid far better. So if you're interested in buying in Ohio, you can do that, and just realize that it's incredibly difficult to move a mobile home in Ohio. It's not difficult, it's just going to cost you many thousands of dollars that it wouldn't in other states.
Yeah, because so what you're saying is you've got, and I apologize for interrupting, but what the listener, just to explain to the listener, what you're saying is this example you brought up, the 65 lot or 65 unit mobile home park, you're calling it is actually more like a 14 or a 15 because that's how many mobile homes currently exist on it. And in order to fill those lots and put homes on there, in each lot, you have to move in an actual structure for someone to live in order to collect some type of rent, and that's where the challenge lies. And Ohio has some extra red tape in actually completing that process. If that's what you're saying, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And if you're going to put now I'm not talking about new mobile home parks. There's a lot of money to be made if you own a lot of land, you develop it, and you're putting in nothing but new mobile homes, and everyone has to own the home. Your bottom price is going to be right around $30,000. You might get it in there for $25,000, but just assume you're at $30,000.
Okay.
If you want to get a bigger, I'm talking a 14 by 70 new mobile home. If you want to put a double wide or something bigger or nicer in there, well, then that's going to be more.
Right.
I'm not talking about that kind of investing. What I'm talking about is the 1970s, metal-sided. They have a metal roof. Maybe there's a gentle slope with shingles, but it's rare. Mm-hmm. Those are the types of homes you can always pick them up for $1,500 or less. But by the time you pay for them and move them, you're going to have $10,000 into it.
Sure.
You've got the permits, and maybe you need to upgrade the electric. There's always something wrong with the lot. You know, a lot of these places started out as campgrounds and turned into mobile home parks. So the lots aren't big enough. You have to know what the laws are. If you don't have 15 feet all the way around the home, you could get an inspector that walked in and said, all right, you need to remove every other home in this park.
Oh, geez.
And you have to know the risks. You know, there's just some things you don't do. I went and looked at a property that I had bid over $500,000 on it 5 or 6 years ago, and they just let it get run down. They had pulled out 3 or 4 homes. There were another 10 condemned. That if I could fix the condemned homes, which I had intended on doing for most of them, over half, even with them, I'd still only have 20 units. But with all the work and the time crunch I had to have on it, because there were already violations with the city, I bid it up to $100,000 at the auction, and then somebody else came in. They bought it for $150,000.
Wow.
And I had bid, you know, I had put in an offer of $500,000 just a few years ago on this.
Wow.
But right now, I could have got it up there so it was worth $500,000 again. I guess I own enough real estate now that I'm not looking for a huge job. I don't want to do another turnaround. I'd rather buy a 60 unit with 58 tenants that needs a little bit of asphalt and a couple of roofs. Okay. And I can make a phone call and the roofs are done and write them a check, and that's that.
Right. Awesome. No, that makes sense. And that's an incredible story just about the fact that you were in there just 5 or 6 years ago, like you said, offering $500,000, and now it's now you're at a small percentage of what that original offer is, which is it's just amazing that they would let that property degrade down to that type of condition. Can we?
And it's very sad to see that much money lost.
Sure.
Because all they had to do was keep up with what they were doing. But in real estate, it is a perishable business. If you don't keep your eye on the ball, it falls apart quickly. Everybody thinks that depreciation is a phantom loss, and it's fantastic. The problem is, if you're not paying attention to your real estate, it does fall apart. And it doesn't take 27 and a half years for a residential unit to fall apart. It goes way faster.
Good point. No, great point. Why don't we touch more on what you brought up with this 60 unit? I'd like to hear maybe a little bit more about the ins and outs of this deal and how you're structuring it, or what your plans are with this property, and maybe hear a little bit more about how the income side is going to work once you've got it performing the way you'd like.
This is a very boring deal.
Okay.
However, we can talk of it.
Hey, I want to hear about it. I mean,
loan.
That's a big property.
This is the first bank loan I'm getting since 2007.
Wow.
I bought my 50-unit mobile home park with $650,000 of owner financing, and really financed the rest of it through using equity of other properties I had, but with private lending. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have any of my own money in there. This one, I brought in a partner. Some of my properties I own with partners, mm-hmm. and he has a bunch of properties that are paid off. A bunch. He has 8 or 10, and plenty of lines of credit on them. So we'll use his lines of credit to pay for the down payment of somewhere around $300,000 to $365,000. It's about $1.5 million purchase price. We'll go in, do that, set aside money at closing to fix the roofs, which is the major problem. But they're actually in pretty good shape. We're getting a good deal. I know the seller. As a matter of fact, I found out about this while we were down at the conference in Cincinnati. And for all of your listeners, everybody in real estate should be going to the OREA conference every fall. I don't care how much you know or how many deals you have, you can learn more there, and you can meet the people that will take you to the next level.
That is an awesome
But that's where
statement.
I found out about this.
That is, I didn't know that. That is incredible that you actually found this deal as a result of going to the conference. And I know you haven't heard the podcast yet, but you're going to be an avid listener soon. But man, do I beat up.
I bet I am.
I hope so. I beat up on networking and relationships and going to meetups and conferences to the audience constantly. I'm laughing because you just proved my point that I'm constantly repeating like a broken record every time I record, which is talking to people, building relationships, and increasing your portfolio, your holdings, your business as a result. So awesome. Thank you for saying that. Please continue on.
Oh, so there's a part of the story that's interesting. I meet a lady that I don't know because I happened to volunteer my time. I was standing in the back of the room. She thought I was important because I had a microphone. And she said, "Hey, you're from the Canton area. You're from Stark County. I know somebody that might want to sell a 60 unit in Canton." I said, "Well, by all means, tell me." People tell me this all the time. It never pans out, but I look into every one of them.
Sure.
She says, "I'll get you the number." She comes back the next day. "Here's the phone number." So I'm at dinner the next day. I call this phone number, and I'm talking to the guy. He says, "Yeah, you don't, I don't actually own it. That's my daughter." And he gives me her name and started talking about a drop zone. I said, "Well, I'm a skydiver. I've jumped there before. I know your daughter."
No way.
So I got the daughter's phone number here. She's the owner of this 60-unit complex. I knew her 10 years ago when I was a skydiving instructor. She still does a lot of jumping. My partner is also a skydiving instructor. So we all came together. The negotiation, I took her out to lunch. She walked right in. We hadn't seen each other in almost 10 years. Walked up and gave me a hug.
Awesome.
And that's how you start a negotiation. We started with a hug. We ended with a hug. Everybody's happy. Everybody trusts everybody. And it's the smoothest, easiest deal I have ever worked on.
That's great. And what's interesting
but
is
I would not have known about that.
What we've said before is sometimes you got to take a risk and just take a big leap, and grow your wings on the way down. I'm sorry, I'm making a bad joke reference to the skydiving, but that's awesome. Please,
yeah,
please
and
continue.
if that doesn't work, just pull a parachute.
Exactly. That's incredible. So
there is a lot of truth right there. When I train skydivers, you can make pretty much any mistake, and generally too, it's that third one that really gets you. I do the same thing when I'm training new people in real estate investing. Your first deal, I recommend you do it a small one. Yeah, you can go out and buy a 100-unit building if you want, but one mistake could put you out forever.
Sure.
Go out, buy a house. You're going to mess everything up. Just accept that you're going to make a mistake and move on. Try not to make the same mistake again. Then when you're buying new things, when I went from one house to 20 in 2 years, it was no big deal. I mean, the second house was kind of a big deal, but the third one and the fourth one got a lot easier. And then I bought a duplex, and that wasn't really any different than a house. And then I bought a 4-unit, and I'm still in the same city. There's still residential units. And I realized, wow, there's a big difference between a duplex and a 4-unit, because now I'm sort of residential, but I'm sort of commercial. And so that was the one big thing that I did differently. And then I went to a completely different city, and at the time, I thought all utility companies worked the same, and all of this worked the same. And it was amazing to me that, in one city I invest in, I get stuck with the water bill when the tenant moves out, and in another one, the water's a private company, so I don't have to worry about that. So I moved to a new city, and instead of the city council being somewhat against me, a guy walked in while we were working on the building, said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. Can I take a look around?" He said, "By the way, I'm from the city council, and we're giving out free grants to anybody that owns a building on Main Street that wants to reface the front of it."
Nice.
And I thought, wow, this is a great city. I should buy more here. But now I've got, it's only a 6-unit, but it's one of the big buildings in a little teeny town right on the main intersection with 2 storefronts and 4 apartments up top. So I'm in a new city with storefronts, but still, that's only 2 major things that are different. And I would recommend to anybody that's buying stuff, if you own a 1 to 3 unit, they're pretty much all the same. If you get 4 or 5 units and up, you have slightly different rules. If you have residential, that's totally different than commercial. If you have, storefronts, even mobile homes are different than apartments. Apartments are a little bit different than houses, but not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. So try not to do too many things that are different and out of your comfort zone. Always be stretching your comfort zone, but do it 1 or 2 changes at a time, because it's that third one, just like in skydiving, that'll make bad things happen.
No, that's a great piece of advice. I love that. No, that's a great point. That is, What I guess what I'm hearing too on the backside is, I mean, you're just I don't want to call you an average guy, because you're awesome and you've done a lot and you've served our country, but you started off just like anyone else.
Yeah, I'm just average.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that, because you've done an incredible job building a portfolio. You've got a great business, and as we've kind of touched on, I mean, it all starts with one, and your advice is something I think all the listeners need to hear and write down, which is, don't get too far out of your comfort zone. You make a mistake, you learn from it, you continue on, you move forward, but you don't necessarily need to jump from a 2-unit duplex into a 60-unit apartment building as your third deal in life. Step by step, which is awesome. I mean, common sense type stuff, but not a lot of people have that restraint in learning and discipline enough to build their business that way. Now, that said, go ahead.
Yes, when we were at the OREA conference, I think it was 2 years ago, I decided that my partner and I decided we wanted to get into storage units.
Okay.
So I said, hey, here's this guy. He's teaching about storage units. What do you say we look at it? There's a 460-unit storage facility. I really want to own this. I go out to breakfast with the owner every Wednesday, and it's just a couple blocks from my office. We could walk there. This would be the perfect deal. Mm-hmm. That being said, I'm not about to jump in. I own a couple hundred units, but I don't own any storage units at all.
Right.
So I went and listened to a guy down in Cincinnati talk about storage units. He impressed me, so I bought all this stuff for, $1,000 or whatever.
Sure.
And then I flew down to Orlando, and I spent a weekend listening to the guy.
Okay.
And I continued to go out with the owner of this storage facility every Wednesday morning for breakfast and pick his brain as much as I could. I didn't get in a hurry. I didn't jump in and buy that property. Instead, I found a 42-unit storage facility, and I bought it because there were just some things that they weren't making sense to me. And I'm really glad I bought that little one. Now that I've owned it, I don't believe you actually know anything. Read all the books you want, go to all the seminars, talk to all the people. You still don't know anything until you've owned it for a year. By the time you've made enough mistakes and you've paid the bills to cover the mistakes, and you've done that for a year, you've went through at least a 1-year cycle. Now you actually know something about that type of investing. So I bought that, and I told everybody I'm not buying anything bigger, no more storage units until I've owned it for a year. I did the same thing with the mobile home park. I said I'm not going to buy another one until I own it for a year. And almost exactly 12 months later, I bought another one, and not too long after that, a third one. But when you go out, buy something, really be involved. Don't just hand everything off. Yeah, it's great if you have a manager, especially if you live out of town. But you need to stay on top of the finances. You need to know where money is coming in and going out. You need to have a plan. And once you follow and look at the numbers for a year, then you'll truly understand it and know if you want to buy more of that property or not.
Sure. No, that's awesome. I love that strategy as well. The storage unit, so do you still own that 42-unit storage unit or storage facility?
I do.
And have you
As a matter of fact, this morning, I just told my manager, go ahead and stick that on LoopNet in case somebody wants to buy it. It was good. I learned what I needed to learn out of it. In my opinion of storage, most of them are overpriced. If you can get a good price for a storage facility, they're the easiest type of rental to make money. In Ohio, we have fantastic laws for storage. You don't have tenants, you have customers.
Sure.
And that makes life a lot easier. People just pay for storage units, because if not, you just overlock it, have an auction, and almost everyone comes in and pays you at the auction. So you don't even auction stuff off. And if you think you're going to auction anything off and buy gold coins that they stuck in there, you're wrong. They're filled up with old newspapers and stupid things that nobody wants.
Yep. Oh, I know it, because I had one. I just cleaned it out in the last few months. I sat on that puppy for like 10 years, and it was just filled with junk, man. I couldn't believe it. I remember cleaning it out, and I'm like going through all this stuff and finding like old CDs, and I'm like, I don't even need a CD anymore. It's all going on my phone. It's just crazy stuff. It's
right.
Awesome. I love it. It's a great point.
But you paid for it for 10 years.
Yep. Oh, yeah,
Look at how much money you spent for
know.
a couple $100s worth of stuff.
And the rent went up. And this is just a side note. When I got this storage unit, it was a 10 by 10. I had, I was fixing, flipping houses. So initially it was like extra materials, tools, things like that. But then as my business grew, I acquired, more space to actually keep the stuff with, we'll call it with me or at the job sites or the offices that I have. And it was back then, it was just small. It was like a one-man show back then. And, it was $100 a month. It was like $99 a month. And by the time I closed out the storage unit, which was over this summer, it was $215 a month. So not only did I pay it for 10 years, they also doubled the rent on me over that time. They made a mint on me, man. That's awesome. I love it. Crazy. What a great business, though, huh?
It is fantastic. And if you want to have a nice, easy life and you just want to collect a decent return on your money, that's the way to own property. If you are younger or just more aggressive and you want to go after, I can take all the money I have invested in there and put it into much more difficult, apartment buildings, houses, any type of residential. I like butts in beds. If I can get somebody to sleep there, they're going to keep coming home, and that's my cream of the crop. And I do it in big units and little units. Sometimes they have wheels. Sometimes they're brick and mortar. Sometimes they have basements. I don't care. As long as somebody sleeps there, I can take that and make it more valuable. I can buy them. That's the best part about the 60 unit. They haven't raised rents in a decade. Wow. I have a lot of upside potential there. So I can go in and force appreciation and make that work. Whereas the storage facility, we'll get a small bump every year, but not significant. Mm-hmm. And I would rather take the money I have invested in that and make it grow faster somewhere else.
Sure. Well, that makes
sense.
So,
and I could be wrong. Talk to somebody that knows something about storage. Like I said, I've had one small facility for 1 year.
Okay.
I just know I can make much more doing other things.
Sure.
Whereas if you just want to write a check, there's next to no maintenance there.
Right.
I mean, we fixed a couple of locks, a door, you tighten springs or do whatever. I don't know. The maintenance bill is frequently zero for the month. So we spray weed killer on it in the summer. We plow it if it snows in the winter, and that's it.
I love it. That's awesome. One thing you mentioned about that, acquiring that storage unit was you sat and had breakfast with the owner of another large storage facility for a very long time every Wednesday morning. And what I'm hearing as I was listening to you, I'm thinking, and I don't know if I've said this before, but what the listener really needs to grab from that is the fact that you may not have a mentor that you're directly, receiving instruction from, we'll call it, but there are opportunities to sit down with experienced investors to help you learn just, simply by asking them to go to breakfast once a week or once a month for, $15 or $20. And I think even from what you're telling me, well worth the cost and the time.
You don't even need to do that. Yeah, you can go out and pay $30,000, $40,000 for a mentoring program. You can pay, $1,000 or $2,000 for the whatever.
Sure.
You don't need to do that. Sometimes it's helpful, and I don't have a problem paying for it. But I got involved in real estate, and we're still back to the first 2 years I was investing that really helped create me. I went to every meeting I could. And I talked to a family member, and they said, "Oh, you can't go to the property owners meeting. You actually have to be, a landlord. You have to have a couple of property." So I waited until I owned a couple of investment property before I went. And as soon as I got there, I was amazed that they'd let anybody in that just wanted to learn about buying rental property.
Right.
And boy, was my opinion wrong when I started.
Sure.
But I got that, and then I joined the next group, Stark County REIA, and then I heard my first speaker. It was Mr. Landlord, Jeff Taylor. Mm-hmm. Man, if you haven't heard him, he is just phenomenal.
Sure.
So, of course, I took all the money I could. I called up a friend and said, we've got to own this. You got to give me $300, and I'll come up with the other $300. We can buy it. And we bought all the stuff he had for like $600. Well, I figured if this is how fantastic it is, I got to go to that place down in Columbus at the time. And back then they were having 2 or 3 different conferences a year, and I never missed one. And then I went back to the Alliance Group, and I was immediately on the board, and then I was on the board of Stark County. And then they elected me president of the one group. And right after that, I decided I'm now spending time in 2 different meetings. I have 2 different board meetings, so that's 4 times a month that I get to meet with all these great people that are doing wonderful things. I need to meet with them more often. I should start a Wednesday morning breakfast. So I went out to breakfast, and I invited everybody. And we got there, and guess how many people showed up? My wife and I. And for a month, my wife and I were the only people there. And I finally started getting people to show up. And next thing you know, we moved to a completely different city. And so I found out they actually had a breakfast meeting in Stark County in Canton, Ohio. But it was at like 7:30 in the morning, one Saturday a month. And I didn't really want to get out of bed that early to go. And I decided real investors, they said, well, that's the only time people can be there because they have jobs. I said, I don't want people with jobs.
Right.
I want investors. So I decided we're going to have a breakfast meeting at 8:30 in the morning on Wednesday. And a handful of people complained they couldn't be there. I said, well, then you should quit your job. And next thing I know, we've got 10, 15, 20 people showing up. We have people running for different offices that come in and talk to us. We've done millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate deals. It's frequent that, maybe once a month, sometimes more than that, at least a couple people will leave that breakfast, drive straight over to a house, and they might buy the house. There's private lenders that show up, or at least hard money lenders. There's people buying properties, people selling properties. And now, every week, we have a group of people there.
That's awesome.
But that was just something that I decided we needed.
I love that idea.
I needed to spend more time, and this gives me every week I get to spend time with people that are doing something. So start a breakfast. We have coffee. I don't ever go for coffee in the evening, but I think a couple times a month our real estate group has a get-together for coffee. And now they're doing grapes in a glass, which I might go to that one. I like wine.
There you go. Good idea.
But any excuse to hang out with other investors, it will get you further ahead.
No, I completely agree. And that's all incredible information you've provided. Anything else you want to touch on before we start to wrap it up?
I believe that the most important thing is the connections and taking action.
Okay.
I don't care where you are, where you're starting, how many hundreds of units, or if you don't own any. If you don't get out there and put yourself in the game, you're never going to score a touchdown, hit a home run, or anything else important. Just get out, take action, and the people around you, treat them well. They are far more important than any deal. There is no excuse. Anybody can cheat anybody once, but they will never make real money unless they have a good, rock-solid reputation and a lot of connections. So take care of everybody. Even if you feel they wronged you, do the right thing. It'll come back and be good for you in the long run.
Great piece of advice. Great piece of advice. So, Eric, what I'd like to hear a little bit more, as we close up here, a question I often ask. What type of books or material are you into, educating yourself now currently? What's on your desk right now that you're reading or studying?
I am finishing up The Great Deformation, which is a pretty decent book. I listen to multiple podcasts. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Robert Kiyosaki has a great podcast out there. I'll probably add yours to the list so I can listen to that.
Sure. We got to listen to your own podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I never drive anywhere without listening to a podcast.
Right.
I like a lot of different books. It depends on what you're interested in that moment. There's some basic ones everybody should read, I think, like The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, Cash Flow Quadrant, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Kiyosaki. But then you need to figure out what is it that you want to do. If you're interested in setting up your entity, own your own corporation. If you're interested in investing in the stock market, Common Sense and Common Stocks was a great one I just read.
Okay.
I real estate is doing well, and it's pretty much taking care of itself. Mm-hmm. So I'm into a lot more of the Malcolm Gladwell. I've read virtually everything he's written.
Have you read that?
And
10,000 Hour one? I just heard about this one yesterday. I don't know the actual title, but...
Oh, I know he was talking about 10,000 times or 10,000 hours in another one of his books. But if he has a new book out, I'll definitely read it.
I believe it's the 10,000 Rule by Malcolm Gladwell. I'd have to double check on that. Somebody just recommended it to me yesterday, and I literally penned it down. I always carry one of my new things I'm doing this for 2017 that started now is I'm carrying this little notebook with me everywhere I go, and I'm just penning down stuff as people say things or make recommendations, and that's what I'm getting a lot out of that is book recommendations, which is incredible. So I got to do some research on that, but I believe the concept is...
without any question, that will be at the top of my list.
Absolutely.
As soon as I finish the 2 or 3 books I have going right now.
Yeah, that's how I've always got a couple at once I'm reading. So what's the best way for the audience to get a hold of you if they want to contact you? And I wouldn't recommend putting out your cell phone number, but maybe email, website. I know you have a real estate company out in Ohio, so maybe some investors that are interested in working with you as on the buy side or management side. Let's get that out there for the audience.
Absolutely. If you're interested in management or sales, you absolutely want to talk to my management company. And their website is clearskyrealty.com. If you're just interested in looking at something, I only list a couple of investor properties. So if you click on for sale and investor properties for sale, that'll give you the 3 or 4 that we have listed right now. We don't do home sales. If you call me up and say, yes, can you help me buy a house? I'll say no. If you want to buy a huge apartment building, I am very happy to help you with that. And there's a couple of other agents in the office that'll do littler things, but really we just focused on management. If you want to contact me, I have the email address CEO@ClearSkyRealty.
Okay. All right.
So you could email that or look at the website. We also have a YouTube channel with a couple of our apartments and a little video about how we got started with the first house I rehabbed.
Oh, that's awesome.
YouTube, Clear Sky Realty.
I'm going to check that out too.
And that's sure great. We have a Facebook page, but I have no idea what's on it. I think that's mainly for the renters.
Yeah, I know how that goes. That's how my world operates. I was at a meetup the other night, and one of the guys there from the mortgage company was like, hey, I'm going to tag you on Facebook and put these photos on your page or your wall. And I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, go ahead and do whatever. Fantastic. I don't know how to do it.
I'll have one of those 20-year-old girls that works for me that actually understands that. She'll take care of everything for me.
That's awesome. All right, Eric, thank you again for spending the time with me today. This has been an incredible podcast with a great story, very motivational for all the listeners out there. I mean, this can happen. This can be done. He recommended going to this OREA meeting, which is it's once a year in the fall, right?
Right. Pretty much every November, one of the first weekends in November, and I don't ever miss it. It's one of the best things you can do.
That's awesome. No, for sure. So hopefully we can get some more attendees based on you speaking on the podcast today, and meet some more people and do some more deals. All of us, right? So
absolutely.
Again,
and thank you very much, Joe. I've appreciate all the time you've given me.
No, it was awesome. I mean, meeting you and this just listening to you speak at the Advanced Dealmakers Forum that we were at this OREA conference. I thought, wow, this guy really has a good head on his shoulders. And one of the things that came out of it is you just said, do right by people. Even if they've wronged you in the past, do the right thing, and it's going to come back to you. You're going to benefit and profit as a result. And I think that's true in all aspects of life. And in real estate, it's exactly the same thing. So, again, Eric, thank you for your time today. I'll connect with you after the podcast and get you the information so you can use this show to maybe promote it on your Facebook page or whatever you want to do, and hopefully we will do that. We can stay in touch.
I'd love that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investorempowermentchicago.com or tennisgrouprealty.com.